City squares are at the heart of many European cities. They're places where people meet, relax, and watch the world go by, often surrounded by old facades, cobblestones, and a throng of busy shoppers and workers. In this episode, I'm building one for our fictional Dutch city of Noevorden. The goal isn't to make something flashy, but rather something that feels lived in, a square that could easily exist in a modern but historic city today. So to do that, I'll need to pay attention to the details, the layout, the paving, and the mix of buildings and their uses. And I'm going to be walking you through the assets, the mods, and the design choices to help make this square feel authentic and part of the city's story. In the last episode, I created the city's first university campus. I believe it's integrated nicely. There's plenty of walkability as well as transit connections with the expanded tram network and the creation of the second metro stop. Although the building heights were increased for that development, the focus was still very much on creating ground level views and to concentrate on the spaces between the buildings and try and make them feel believable. This will act as something of a transition zone, and it's going to give me scope to expand with some more modern architecture behind the university. So for all you guys who have watched some of these series before, you know that I'm starting in the middle and I am working my way out. So I really want to have this looking like it's almost like organic growth. Obviously it won't be, but I want to kind of give that impression as I'm building out the series. There will be some sort of obvious examples and exceptions in terms of why I can't do that. So like our power station, of course, we've got that well out of the city, and currently we have our depots well out of the city as well. Eventually I'll be looking to bring them in a little bit closer to the main centre, but for now, it's a problem essentially for another day. What I'm going to do here in this episode though is, of course, we are going to make the square as I showed you earlier on, but what I'll also need to do is actually expand the area around that. And one thing that we definitely don't have very much of in the city right now is commercial. So I'm very much going to focus on creating some commercial districts, or I guess not so much of a district, but at least a few blocks, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And at the same time, we're going to sort out our sort of main arterial road, of course, as well. We're going to really use a bit of a mix. We've got EE, we've got UK, we have some German, I think, and Recolor is going to come in really useful when we're building this out. I reckon today is going to be a bit of an experimental one. We're going to try and mix and match with the blocks as much as we can really, and try and figure out the assets that are going to work and the assets that are not. In addition to looking at the assets, again, what I want to do, much like our previous episode with our university across the road, is I really want to try and focus on the ground level and figure out what's going to be possible and what's not. So when I think of shopping streets in the Netherlands, I tend to think of, walkability, pedestrian areas. I tend to think of, narrow streets, reasonably tall buildings, and it being really busy as well. So I do want to try and keep as much of that in focus as I'm building out the blocks. As I get through the build today, you'll see me sort of put assets in and maybe take some out. We'll kind of swap them out and try and figure out what works and what doesn't. I think as I'm building it out, I probably want to try and focus on making the front road, the arterial road, sort of as kind of Dutch looking as I possibly can, but still getting plenty of life up here, with walking pedestrians and whatnot. I will mention this was recorded before the Bridges and Ports DLC released, so the crazy walking that we see in some of the cities and the traffic hasn't quite kicked in just yet in this city. I have ran it, I've managed to get the mods working okay. It wasn't too long before I had to wait for that, and it is mad the amount of traffic and pedestrian traffic that we have. The actual vehicle traffic isn't too bad, but the people walking is wild. So if anything else, it gives me more of an incentive to work on the public transport and continue to sort of build that out and give our Sims lots of options. So obviously the trams are featuring, we've got our metro on the go, and I think I need to get some buses and really just kind of flesh out just every single option that we have in the game. Now you're going to see me use some static noises decals here. The reason why I'm using these right now, these are actually local mods. They are on PDX if you want to get them. I don't have that set up just yet myself, and the Urban Decay ones that I would have preferred to use weren't loading when I was playing the game at this stage. But I've got all of that stuff working, and once I finish off my other series, Bali High series, I'm going to basically get that PDX version, get that into the main playlist. But for now I kind of want to avoid using it, just so it's a little bit easier to share with you guys if you're downloading the mod list from the Discord, and obviously the guys on Patreon who have access to all the game saves. So I'm going to continue using them for now because I just wanted to try and take a little bit of that whiteness and brightness off the roofs. But once I've got my mods all working again, I'm going to go take them out and replace them with the ones that I want. So I'm going to use Crypto Gamers net lanes, and they are perfect for adding the simple detailing of just adding a little bit of colour, to these streets. Now, a quick note on the street selection as well. Obviously, I want things to be really, really pedestrian friendly. That is the one-way pedestrian street. So really, there are kind of two vanilla options. We have the pedestrian street, which is quite wide, and then we've got the one-way, which is obviously half the size. And I think I'm going to go with the one-way ones, simply because they just are a better fit from a scale point of view with the buildings that are on it. And I want to have things nice and tight and really compact and quite narrow. Over on the museum district from episode 2, I was using a road builder version which didn't have vehicle access, and what happened eventually is that the city services don't have access to it, so plenty of pedestrian walking traffic on it, but at the end of the day, if they were just going to turn into crime hotspots because the police can't get there, then it's not a realistic option to use. So what you will see is that the one-way systems, or the one-way pedestrian streets, you have pedestrians on one and then you have road access on the other. It's not perfect, but I think at this stage of the game it's going to be the best option that we have with the limitations of the networks, really. It'd be nice to see if there was options to have buildings that didn't need vehicle access, and it was just purely pedestrian, but it is what it is. We work with it. So of course we are going to be making a busy square, and part of that is making sure that we have plenty of options for our pedestrians, and I'm going to essentially just hook up the areas surrounding it. There are a couple of bits and pieces where, realistically we should have walking access and we don't quite. You will find here in this particular section we're going to be making a little bit of an outdoor eating area, a little cafe or a bar or whatnot. So we'll get to that, and we can amend the networks and the invisible path networks and all that kind of stuff a little bit later on. But I think what I'd like to do just now is really just focus on at least one corner of the square, and then we can kind of move on to the rest of it. I'm going to continue to use net lanes where I can. I think the effects that we have in some of these net lanes are really good, and we've got a really decent choice in Crypto Gamer's pack here. So continue to do that, and then we can have a little look and just see if we're happy with the space. Obviously, once the space is made, surfaces are down, then that's going to give us essentially the backbone for making the rest of the build. And here we've got a pretty nice little scene already. So I reckon now it's time for our second arterial block. If you can remember again from previous episodes, what I'll do is I'll tend to build out a little bit, really just to get a nice screenshot and a nice video, at the end in terms of cinematics. And what we're going to end up doing is ripping out a lot of stuff and replacing it with something that we're going to find a little bit more suitable. And that's exactly what we're doing just now. So we're going to pick a couple of the German asset buildings around the back, or around the sides, corners even, and then we'll just fill them up with some of the Dutch ones. Going to get parking at the front and the back here. I think we are looking like we've got plenty of scope for it. In the end, I'm not too sure if parking around the back would necessarily be a good idea along the pedestrian area, but it is what it is. I think what we could really be doing for a Dutch build or a Netherlands sort of inspired build is having some proper underground parking, so might look at that and maybe create some of that ourselves with the road builder and whatnot. There is an underground parking asset, but it is huge. The actual footprint of it, above ground is actually massive, so we'll come up with something clever in terms of underground ideas, and we'll see what we need to do about that. But I reckon once we start, we'll probably end up having quite a lot. But for the time being, let's get this block expanded and get it wrapped up. Again, a couple of German assets in the corner, again, look always pretty nice, to be honest with you, beautiful. And then we'll just shift a few of these bad boys into place. Now obviously, as we're doing that, I'm just going to tidy up the actual arterial itself. There's a couple of patches where I don't quite have the decals and net lanes in place, so we'll get them sorted out quickly. I think if we just take a minute to kind of scan through and see what we've got, I think the whiteness of some of the buildings, again, as I mentioned it earlier, they need a bit of decal work just to kind of blend them in and make sure that they're not sticking out too much, but we'll get to that in the next episode. Can't do it right now, obviously. And this essentially is going to be part of the narrow road. I very much do like seeing the commercial just on the ground floor without a million and one adverts and poster boards and all that kind of stuff over. I think if we get that on both sides, it should work quite well. This is looking very bright, so again, I would like to swap a few of the kind of more sort of brick buildings in that particular street. But I think what I'll do is we'll just kind of put out a row of them across the road, and we can kind of see what it looks like. I think what we're going to realistically need to do is kind of mix and match. I think that's pretty much going to give us our best result. But one thing we could do, of course, is that we could use static floppables. We could use the blocks and just basically manually place, some of the commercial signs and whatnot on it as well. So there's different options, and as I said at the beginning, it's a bit more of an experimentation. What I definitely want to do though is just make sure that we've got suitable assets on the main square. That's not something that I'm willing to go back and rip out later on. These little streets, not so bad, but the main ones, not so much. I reckon one thing we can do in fact is, this is a really nice asset, although it's quite big, but the frontage of it is pretty nice. I'm going to take out some of the Dutch ones, slot this one in right bang in the middle of the street, and it should break things up a little bit, and yeah, it does give us a little bit of commercial signage there as well, so I think that's a pretty nice fit, and yeah, slotted in pretty nice. I like the red brick on that. Right, let's get the rest of this block sorted, and that'll basically be one corner of the square done as well. Not gonna lie, that took me absolutely ages just to do those couple of blocks. I haven't really used extensively these assets before, so scrolling through, you know, one by one and trying to find the right thing is pretty time consuming. But with that out of the way, it was time to go back and revisit that railway that I made a pig's ear of trying to extend and widen the tunnel. As Qualnut on Discord quite rightly pointed out, I just had to deselect these things and we're good to go. We've got a nice 4-lane railway. That's going to give me some really big options to expand later on, and thanks again for the advice, do appreciate it. Now I really did want to add a few more trams into the equation, and I'm going to build this reasonably close. I don't want it coming out too far. I don't want to be messing about with tunnels for trams or anything like that. I think we obviously have options to do the bridges now, which is pretty cool, but again, remember this is recorded before this came out, so I'm going to keep it on the main island, and this is going to give us something to sort of build off in the next episodes. I got a pretty nice bit of inspiration on the notes, or in the notes rather, for our train yard. I was going to do that outside of the main island, but I've got a really good idea to get it nice and close actually to the train station, so looking forward to getting onto that, and I think I'll probably do that in the next few episodes. What I do want to do is I'll definitely, this is just temporary by the way, just in case you're wondering if it looks like crap, basically it won't be left like this, I do promise. I just want the extra trams running and get things going. I reckon I'm happy enough with the actual placement of the main depot itself. I think that's okay, but obviously it's going to take a little bit of care and a little bit of effort to try and get that into its surroundings. So I think that, along with the train station, I think I could probably, train depot I should say, I think we could probably make a full episode out of that, which would be pretty nice. And of course I want everything grown from the inside, so we'll be building the actual neighbourhoods out towards that general direction pretty shortly I reckon as well. So, time to get back to our commercial district and our city square. First thing I want to do is to rip out that tram line. Remember, this is the place where two tram lines are going to really just converge, and they're going to lead off into our old town. Now, I really did need to have a working road there, so I went for pedestrian again, and we can run the tram straight through that. It should be pretty good. I think essentially what I've got in my mind for this one, when we have a look at the layout of the road, it kind of looks like there should almost be like an arterial road there. So I like to think that perhaps at some point we've maybe filled that arterial in with, you know, pedestrian, and we get rid of the actual vehicle traffic. So that's the kind of way I'm looking at it. You can kind of see, you know, where it crosses the road and then it kind of leads off. We've kind of got our main road heading out towards the north there. We're going to spend some time getting a really fancy square. Not really, that's basically it there. Happy days. No, ignore that nonsense in the middle. I was just playing about with what we could maybe use as a kind of monument or a focal point really on that square, and in the end I just ended up ripping it out. You know, it didn't fall apart, and I couldn't really find a decent prop that I was happy with to put in its place either. So when I was looking on Google Maps, there was quite a few squares that I found that have, you know, like a standalone building essentially, you know, in the middle of the square, and I guess it's a kind of government building or a civic building or a church in some scenarios as well, and I think that would have worked pretty well. I thought about maybe using the college asset, plonking that in the middle, and of course there's a couple of churches now on PDX mods, and they'll probably be making an appearance once I've got the mod list sorted out, and I'm happy to sort of start messing about with those things again. I think when we look back and look online, there are a ton of squares that have really just nothing in it at all, you know, if you leave it completely blank. I'm not going to do that purely because the surfaces just look a little bit too uniform, I think, to get away with having a really big space in this game. I think it just looks too, sort of almost too synthetic, so to speak, so I think leaving it completely blank for me wasn't really an option, you know, and it's one of these things that you have to just compromise on, I guess, when you're playing the game. You know, there's things that aren't quite going to look right the way you need it to, and that's life. You suck it up and you get on with it, and you come up with another idea. This big signature asset, beautiful. I think that part there looking onto the square, that looks like a kind of, you know, the side of a restaurant or a bar, doesn't it? So really sweet. And of course, as we come in and we look down the actual little street itself, it's going to give us plenty of variation compared to the rest of the assets around it. So I'm going to double up on that. I'm going to basically flip it and just use another one on the other side, and we should get a pretty decent block there. And I think that kind of looks like a kind of hotel, restaurant type complex, doesn't it? You know, and I think getting it recolored, we've got that kind of brick look about it as well. I think that's a pretty good fit. Complements quite well with the ones across the road as well. And again, we can kind of take a peek out towards the square, and we've got a little view of some of the more historic buildings as well, which is pretty nice. For me, this square is lacking a historical sort of landmark building, so what I'm going to do is I went and grabbed that German police station it had, and I did say I wasn't entirely convinced about having it as a standalone, you know, asset in its old position, so I've just dragged it over here, and we're going to complete the look by having a few of the assets next to each other. Now, I wanted to come back and fill that building. This is such a nice asset, the college one, and I think it's like the third one we've got in the city, and it's probably not going to be the last either, but I think that's a pretty good fit there. I think that kind of looks like the kind of standalone church potentially, you know, that I mentioned there a few minutes ago, and I didn't really want it slap bang in the middle of the square. It was looking a little bit awkward there, so I think we've got a better spot for it as a replacement to the old German one. And yeah, I think that works pretty well with the row homes. And again, this is going to lead our big pedestrian path going south and out towards Old Town. So again, kind of mix and match the assets. These assets aren't necessarily, you know, set in stone. We can take them out, change the colours about a bit, change the heights if we want, and change the levels on them obviously as well. So we're going to find it and just put down our own ones. I think across the road I didn't quite want the full width, so I went for the one way on that one. And again, we'll just plunk down these assets and get it filled out. Now I think with the majority of the buildings in place, you can kind of see the vision kind of come to life there, especially as we go down there on that ground level. Now that sort of landmark building, so to speak, I'm going to mess about with stuff on the roof on the middle one, purely just to break up the repetition on the asset more than anything else. I think by just choosing to upgrade just one of them, it gives that sort of visual break, I guess, in it, and I'm going to revisit that and add a little bit of a landmark to it as well later on. But let's take a little break from the square. We're going to go back and sort of flesh things out in just a moment, but I keep thinking about how I'm going to be connecting the rest of the city, and I'm not too concerned about the other side. I think that's looking like it's going to be, you know, easy enough, but really more how we're going to connect that Old Town, you know, the historic centre. I think before we get too much more building put in place, because once the buildings are in, I ain't going to be ripping them out once they're detailed. That's definitely not going to happen. I just need to make sure that we've got, you know, the right roads in place. I think it's going to take a little bit of work, you know, to get to that point potentially as well before we start really building out. So again, I think that's most likely going to be the next episode, and I might do it off camera. I don't know, we'll see. It could be a little bit tedious to watch, but got a few ideas, and yeah, you'll see them come to life shortly. So what I'm going to do at this point then is to crack on and really get the main square done. I'm essentially going to be creating a bit of a green space, and that green space I've kind of got a bit of inspiration from just outside Rotterdam train station. Now it's not a square in the traditional sense, I guess it's more of a a wide avenue with trees. I think what I wanted to do is to try and combine some of the features that I find there with what you would expect in a typical city square. So I want to try and get, the cafes, the bars, restaurants. I want to get a little bit of a market on the go here as well. And essentially what we'll be doing is really just carefully choosing a combination of surfaces as well. I think it's really easy to use some of them that can come sort of over contrasted or sort of saturated. So I just want to be able to pick the tones sort of carefully and try and make sure that they sort of complement each other and not work against each other. As you can see here, these work pretty well together, and taking that wee bit extra time to kind of surface around the pavement detail, on the pedestrian streets is time consuming, but it does look significantly better, and you can get some real individual character, especially if you can mix and match the surfaces as well. So I reckon what I'll do at this point is I will shut my mouth and I will let you guys enjoy a little bit of detail and time lapse as we sort out the square. Lovely stuff. So I think I'm pretty happy with all of that. So time to just sort out another bit of a block here, and this is really going to be the sort of last major development that we have. I decided to use one of the Chinese assets. Nice big commercial block there, and I don't think it looks too out of place beside our sort of signature. I think it's a hotel, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm going to call it a hotel anyway. We'll use some of the northeast, southwest, they look pretty good with the brick as well. Chuck in some of the Amsterdam stuff, and again we're going to have another signature just at the end to sort of bookend that nicely. And if we just jump in and have a look at the street level, we'll find that there are a couple of things that we want to just adjust here. We can see that these Amsterdam buildings, they've got that sort of brick that's sticking out onto the street, so we're going to offset that and bring that back a little bit. But I think this corner asset that's in the left hand side of the screen there, really beautiful, lovely little cafe bar there that we've got, and I'd love to see more of them in the game actually. Here we go, and we can take a look out to the square. Lovely. Now, the last thing to do really is to go back to where we've popped down that college building, and we've got our little tram station there, is to really just kind of fill the gaps on here as well. So we use the tried and tested, we're going to use the grates, we'll use the nice birch trees, and this space is looking just a little bit plain, so I think we've got to fill that up. We'll add a little bit of greenery, not this here, but greenery in just a minute, and we should be able to sort of flesh that part out as well. So I think this building, I'm not quite sure what I had in mind for this one, whether it's maybe like a little tourist, what do you call it, like a tourist information booth, desk, building, whatever it might be. Maybe we might convert it into a restaurant. Don't know if you'd want it necessarily right that close next to the trams. Might be a wee bit unpleasant if you're sitting outside, but I don't know. But we'll come back to that right at the very end before we take a final look at the final result. What I wanted to do is just to really just complete this block, and again we're going to use some of these big commercial assets and do a bit of a mix and a match with the US and this US Northeast, isn't it, yeah? And some of the Amsterdam assets as well. Again, nice little sort of back streets that we have here. These will get super busy, really busy in the next patch in fact, and yeah, let's take a little look. They're pretty busy already, all things considering. This isn't a through road of any description, so yeah, it's nice to see getting plenty of footfall. So we're going to swing back there and work on that little section just at the edge where we have that tram station, and really all I've got in mind is to have a bit of basic detailing really. We'll get some benches, we'll get some seating, get a few trees down here as well, and we should be good to go with this particular little section. So we've got one final job to take care of, and that is just hooking up our fledgling subway. These stops are obviously really close to each other. We're absolutely going to be hooking up the central station with its own train station later down the line, or subway station. But I think it's interesting to see that although it's a fairly short distance, the Sims are using it, which is cool. And it'll be interesting to see in the next episode with the additional pedestrian footfall whether or not they'll take the tram and then jump into the subway. So yeah, it'd be nice to see how that kind of pans out. But here we go, we can see them definitely using the one at the university, so that's pretty nice to see. Alright then, so let's do a quick review and sort of see where we're at. So this little road, although it's a proper sort of normal road, it's going to see pretty light traffic, so I don't mind that being in there. I think the various different little side streets that we've got sort of leading down and out towards the square have worked quite well. Again, it kind of annoys me that they're only on one side, but it's still the right decision. I don't want that big wide one there, it doesn't look right, it's far too wide. We've gone a bit heavier there on some of the Dutch assets, which is pretty good, and we're going to be using them extensively, obviously as we head out and really create a lot more of these streets down towards our old town. Here you can have a look at the arterial. We've got our trams doing their thing there, which is nice to see. I think we've got a pretty reasonable mix there on the front, and again, I wanted to have kind of taller assets that were going to work against the university on the other side. And again, as we kind of get to the older parts, we can start bringing the scale down a little bit. And talk about bringing the scale down a little bit, here we are at street level on one of our corners. Pretty nice view, isn't it? One thing I would definitely love to see is to have these sort of cafe areas and actually have them functional. How that would work, I have absolutely no idea whatsoever, but I would definitely like to see it in the game some way, whether that's vanilla or whether that's through mods. This view is going to give us a really good look over the sort of grass elements of it, and again, it's absolutely necessary to have something in there to break that surface. It was just too repetitive and too plain looking, really, you know, even though it would be realistic. So for the next episode, I'm definitely going to focus on just figuring out exactly how I'm going to have those roads running into the older town. I've got good ideas for behind the university. I've got ideas for the train station. You guys have left tons of ideas as well, so keep them coming. I do read them all. They'd be really appreciated. But let me know what you thought about this one. As I said, we've kind of done a bit of an experimentation there on the commercial streets, and I think some of them work better than others, but overall, I'm pretty happy with the effect. If you've enjoyed the episode, leave a like. Give us a subscribe if you're not subscribed already, and if you haven't checked the previous episodes, go have a look at them now.